Acts 12, 1 through 19. We've been in Acts for a couple of the accounts that we needed to look at. We were talking about Ananias and Sapphira and some things that happened in Acts. Of course, we talked about Peter healing, or he didn't heal her. He brought her back. He brought Lydia back from the dead, and Paul brought Eutychus back from the dead. So we've kind of been around in Acts. And this account is different. And I think there's really something that we can learn from this, that God can show us about ourselves here today. So I want us to look at this. So stand with me. Acts 12, 1 through 19. About that time, King Herod violently attacked some who belonged to the church. He executed James, John's brother, with the sword. When he saw that it pleased the Jews, he proceeded to arrest Peter, too, during the festival of unleavened bread. After the arrest, he put him in prison and assigned 4 squads of 4 soldiers each to guard him, intending to bring him out to the people after the Passover. So Peter was kept in prison. But the church was praying fervently to God for him. When Herod was about to bring him out for trial, that very night Peter, bound with 2 chains, was sleeping between 2 soldiers, and while the sentries in front of the door guarded the prison, suddenly an angel of the Lord appeared, and a light shone in the cell. Striking Peter on the side, he woke him up and said, "Quick, get up." And the chains fell off his wrist. "Get dressed," the angel told him, "and put on your sandals." And he did. "Wrap your cloak around you," he told him, "and follow me." So he went out and followed, and he did not know that what the angel did was really happening, but he thought he was seeing a vision. And after they passed the first and second guards, they came to the iron gate that leads into the city, which opened to them by itself. And they went outside and passed one street, and suddenly the angel left him. When Peter came to himself, he said, "Now I know that for certain that the Lord has sent his angel and rescued me from Herod's grasp and from all that the Jewish people expected." As soon as he realized this, he went to the house of Mary, the mother of John Mark, where many had assembled and were praying. He knocked at the door of the outer gate, and a servant named Rhoda came to answer. She recognized Peter's voice, and because of her joy, she did not open the gate, but ran in and announced that Peter was standing at the outer gate. "You're out of your mind," they told her. But she kept insisting that it was true, and they said, "It's his angel." Well, Peter, however, kept on knocking, and when they opened the door and saw him, they were amazed. Motioning to them with his hand to be silent, he described to them how the Lord had brought him out of the prison. "Tell these things to James and the brothers," he said, and he left and went to another place. At daylight there was a great commotion among the soldiers as to what had become of Peter. After Herod had searched and did not find him, he interrogated the guards and ordered their execution. Then Herod went down from Judea to Caesarea and stayed there. And God's people said, Amen. Please be seated. Remarkable account. Where's Sam go? There he is. Okay. I guess we'll just kind of all collectively, as a village, keep an eye on him. Okay. This is Herod the Great's grandson, Herod Agrippa the First. Herod Agrippa's father was murdered by Herod the Great back before Jesus was born. But this is Herod the Great's grandson. Herod the Great is the one that wanted to kill Jesus because he felt threatened by him because he was the king of the Jews. Well, he wanted to be the king of the Jews. And so he's the very one, Herod the Great, that murdered the babies in Bethlehem. This is his grandson, Herod Agrippa the First, the historians say. And so he, at this time, now the church has been going so well, We've been talking about the growth of the church and how they were sharing with each other, and no one was hungry, and they were buying, and they were selling their land and bringing the money, and they were helping each other, and all the things that were happening. The church was growing. They were listening to the disciples teaching all the time. Things are going swimmingly, and all of a sudden Herod, for whatever reason, he wanted to please the Jews. He was very much into peer pressure. It was all about how to keep them happy, and he wanted to rule over them, but he wanted them to love him, and he didn't care whose life it cost. He didn't care, and so he arrests James. Now, this is not James, Jesus' brother. This is James, John's brother. This is the son of Zebedee. This is son of thunder. That James. I think in The Chosen they call him Big James, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, yeah. And so, James, he arrested him. Now, I've always read that he put him to death by the sword. And I thought that, maybe he just sent a soldier and murdered him. But the scholars are saying no. And I think my Bible is a little more clear on that he arrested him and put him on trial in front of everyone and beheaded him, is what that meant when he put him to death by the sword. And the Jews were pleased with this. They liked this, that Herod murdered him, which is in essence what he did. But it wasn't just a murder, it was an execution. It was a trial and an execution. And I always thought, well, why did he just murder James and not just murder Peter? Well, it was because he put him on trial first and executed him. And when he saw that the people liked it, the Jewish people liked this, you're talking about dangerous. You see how dangerous the early church was? Some of the Bible movies lately have kind of shown that these guys were running for their lives. They were running in fear. And Peter must have, it says he went somewhere else and stayed. He left. And apparently until Herod died, and then it was safe to come back. But he arrested Peter, but it just so happened that he arrested him right before Passover. That's the Feast of the Unleavened Bread, is leading up to Passover. This is the Passover Seder, and it's ironic. It may just be, Billy, this is the kind of thing that you would probably need to check into. It might just be that he's freed from prison the very night, either 1 or 2 or 3 years later, that he denied that he knew Jesus. Because this all happened right before Passover. So the reason he was able to kill James and not Peter is that Passover happened. You can kind of see some symbolism there, that the death angel passed over him, that he gets to, and of course Jesus made it the resurrection day, but or weekend. He's going to bring Peter out to put him on trial and execute him right after Passover. But the angel spared him. And he didn't. Now, before I get into the whole, the story, the account of the church praying for him, and then they didn't believe it when he was saved. Before I get into that, we need to talk about something here. Because this is kind of the elephant in the room right now. And that is, why did God allow James to be murdered, but he spared Simon Peter? And so we have to look at that, because that is the elephant in the room. Why did God allow James to die, but not Simon Peter? And you also have to ask, why did God allow Jesus to be spared back in Bethlehem, but all of the boys 2 years of age and younger? And scholars say may have been as many as 20 boys that died. They died at Herod's insistence to try to kill Jesus. God spared Jesus, but these boys died. And here James dies, and Peter is spared. Why? How is that fair? The thing that we've got to understand, and I've said this before, we're not all going to live to be 100. If we did, we'd all wait till we were 99 and then we'd get right with God, because we know what kind of time we have. None of us know what kind of time we have. And God is sovereign over life and death. Now, we've seen this. Jesus is the way and the truth and the life, and He possesses life. And I just want to say this morning. This doesn't mean that God was mad at James, but He loved Simon Peter. So, you see what I'm saying? That's not the case here. But as history is playing out, some people are going to live and some people are going to die. And of course, God had a plan for Peter's life. And of course, Jesus had already prophesied that Peter was going to stretch out his hands when he died. He was going to be executed by crucifixion. The Bible doesn't say this, but church history says that Peter said, I don't deserve to die like my Lord, and so they turned the cross upside down. Now that's what worldly history tells us. The Bible doesn't actually have that account. We believe that Nero murdered both Peter and Paul about 68 A.D. And he beheaded Paul, but they crucified Peter in fulfillment of Jesus' prophecy. And so Peter had a lot more to do. He got with Mark, and notice that this happened at Mark's house. And we know from this account that Mark's mother's name was Mary. Isn't that just what the New Testament needs? Another woman named Mary. And so this was probably one of the Marys that went to the tomb on Easter morning. There's a couple of Marys that went, and one of them was probably Mark's mother. And the book Mark has the account of a young man that was running away, and they grabbed him and he tore his clothes off. They were trying to catch him, and he tore out of his robe. He tore out of his clothes and ran off in his underwear, naked. And only Mark records that. And so that was probably Mark. Mark was probably there that night in the garden when Jesus was arrested, and that was what happened to him. In fact, I've heard some scholars say that the upper room where Jesus had the Passover Seder, we had the Lord's Supper, may have been Mark's house. And where Pentecost happened may have been Mark's house. And then this is definitely at Mark's house. And so this was kind of the meeting place. And they were some people of means. They had servants, and they had wealth, and they had a big house and a big upstairs room. And so that's probably where this happened. And at the end of this account, when Peter says, go tell James and the others, now he's talking about Jesus' brother James. And Paul said that was the leaders of the church when he came in, was James, Jesus' brother James, and Simon Peter. And so we got to keep, a lot of people have the same name in the Bible. And so we have to keep account and keep up with who's who. And so, Pharaoh murdered the baby boys in Moses' time, and God allowed that. But Moses was spared. He went down the river in the little basket. And then Herod the Great murdered the babies in Bethlehem, but God allowed it and spared Jesus. And I think Peter probably had survivor's guilt. People that have been in the military. By the way, this was Veterans Day this week, and I applaud our veterans that are in here. I know Tom's a veteran, Harold's a veteran, I know Bo's a veteran. Any other? Mark? We applaud all of you guys. One of the things that a lot of veterans face is survivor's guilt, because they're spared and their friend was not. Why did my friend die and I didn't? Why did I get to come back? And survivor's guilt can be so bad that a lot of veterans have actually taken their lives when they get back home because of that survivor's guilt. Simon Peter probably had to deal with that. And this story that we're reading today is kind of funny. It would be funny, except that we have to realize how serious this was, that James had just been murdered. And they all knew that they could be next. And they felt with all of their heart that he was going to murder Peter as well. And I mean, Herod is going after the church, and he's cutting off the head. He's going to stop Christianity in its infancy. He's already taken out James, son of Zebedee, and now he's going after Simon Peter, and the church is extremely concerned that this is happening. And so they were scared to death, and they're hiding. Even Easter Sunday afternoon, the disciples, John tells us, were hiding in that room, and it may have been this very same upper room. They were hiding in that room for fear of the Jews. They were after them. They were coming after them. And God allowed James to die, but He spared Simon Peter. And y'all, that we've got to come to grips with that God is sovereign. And it doesn't mean that He likes one, doesn't like the other. That's not always the case. Now, He took Herod out right after this account. You keep reading in Acts 12, Herod gets some sort of a worm infection and dies. Acts basically says he dropped dead. Josephus says he lived 5 days. Josephus, the historian. Of course, I'm going to go with Luke, but maybe the 5 days came up to it, and then Luke's reference is when he dropped dead. And outside history tells us about that. He had some sort of a parasitical problem, and it killed him. And it was a terrible, painful death. And so basically he got his, just so you know. But so he's going to put Peter on trial and murder him. And then, but the night before, now this is just like God. He zooms in, He swoops in right when we really need Him. Because this is the night before. And there's 16 guards out there. There's 4 groups of 4. And he's sleeping between 2 guards. And he's in chains. And he's in a prison cell. And suddenly a light comes in. And an angel of the Lord comes in. And the angel taps him on the side, or kicks him on the side, or hits him on the head and says, "Hey, wake up. We're busting out. Wake up. Let's go." Peter wakes up and his chains fall. Peter's telling Luke about this. He said, "I didn't know if it was a dream. I didn't know if it was a vision." You can just hear him telling Luke. And Luke has given us so many little details, like Rhoda's name and when this happened and how many guards. There's a lot of details in this. It's a very detailed account. And Peter's like, "I'm not sure if it's a dream or not." And they get all the way out of the prison. They go to a street, and then the angel disappears. It was his escort. And he kind of came to himself. He's like, "I know this is true now. I know that the Lord has sent an angel, and He spared me." And so he says, "I'm going to go to the church, where we meet." They didn't have a church building, kind of like us. They had a place where they met, and this was at Mark's house, is where they met. That's why Mark knew so much of what had happened. He was eyewitness to a lot of this. And then people call Mark Peter's account because they believe that Peter is the one. He's kind of forefront in Mark's gospel, and they believe that he's the one that told Mark everything that had happened. Well, he's telling Luke what happened here, how he felt. And he goes up and he knocks on the outer gate. Now, this tells you that they had a courtyard. I mean, this was a nice place. And this is why God chose this place, for them to have their church and to meet together and all the events that happened there. And Rhoda, this servant girl, and I love that Luke gives us her name. She hears him knocking, and she goes out there, and she doesn't even open the gate. Now remember, they're afraid. And she doesn't even open the gate, but she hears Peter's voice. He's like, hey, let me in. It's me, it's Simon Peter. And in her joy, she doesn't open the gate. Now that reminds me of the disciples who in their joy didn't believe that it was Jesus. It's just too good to be true. She just couldn't believe it. And it's kind of almost comical that she doesn't let him in. She just ran back in the house. Now remember, she's a servant girl, and so she's thinking, well, there might be a proper etiquette here or whatever, who opens the door, and it's not me. So she goes back in and she says, hey, Peter's outside. And they're all in there praying that God would spare him. And she says, hey, Peter's out at the gate. And they said, you're out of your mind. There's no way. Even though we're all praying, that's impossible. oh man, does this speak to us? She says, no, it's really him. I know his voice. And so they went and let him in. He came in, and of course, then they snuck him out of town. He had to leave. I mean, this was dangerous. This was scary. And then Herod left and went to Caesarea. And then things perhaps cooled down, at least for Simon Peter. We're hard on these people. We're tough on them. We say, here they are and they're praying, and then when God answers their prayer, they don't believe it. But isn't that just like us? We're not used to seeing the supernatural. And we'll come together and we're praying fervently, it said. We're praying for God to do something. And then when He does, but it's a supernatural answer, our brains don't work that way. We're going, what? Did that really just happen? Did I really just see God do a miracle? And it's frightening. It's every time in the Scripture when they see a miracle, it's always frightening. And it's always frightening for us when we see God kind of crash into the reality of the physical world with His supernatural. And we see Him do something that was impossible for Him to do. And I want to go easy on that church this morning. I've been thinking about this and praying about this week. I think what they're doing is exactly what faith is. And the outcome is exactly what we see. Let me explain. In their heart, they're praying for Simon Peter. And in their heart, they know he's a dead man. But they're still praying. And I think that's exactly what faith is. Is that we want something. We need God to come through. And in our heart, we think that's impossible. It's not going to happen. But I'm going to pray anyway. I'm going to ask God to do this thing. I think that's what faith is. If you say, Craig, do you believe Jesus rose from the dead? I'll say, yeah. Well, okay. I mean, what does that look like? I mean, Craig, do you believe that Abraham Lincoln was assassinated in Ford's Theater? Yeah. I mean, I wasn't there. So it's easy for me to say, yeah, I believe it. You know, I've heard it my whole life. I've read it, you know. Do you believe it? Yeah. But I think this is what James is saying in chapter 2 of James, where he says, if it doesn't move you into action, it's not faith. And I think if these early church disciples, these early church Christians that were so nervous about Peter's life, if they had just gone on about their day and about their life and it didn't move them into action, then that wouldn't have been faith. But that's what faith is. We know it's impossible for God to do something, but we're going to move. We're going to alter our lives because we believe that we know He can, and we believe He just might. So ask me again, Craig, do you believe Jesus rose from the dead? And I'll say, yeah, and I'll prove it to you. Because I live my life in such a way that I want to please God. And I talk to God all day, every day. And I go to church. And I give a portion of my hard-earned money to God because I want to give back. I want to show Him that this is real for me. You know, y'all probably heard this I grew up here. Put your money where your mouth is. So, you really believe something? How does it change you? How does it affect you? And my belief that Jesus died and rose again affects every aspect of my existence. I mean, and I'm praying all the time. If I didn't believe that Jesus rose again, if I didn't believe that there was a God, and that's what Hebrews 11 says, it's impossible to please God unless we believe in Him. We can't please God without faith. And so I believe in God. And the thing is, it's not all done in a vacuum. It's not like I'm living for Him and I get zero in return. I'm getting all kind of feedback from Him in return. Just little nods here and there, little winks, and just letting me know that He's in charge, and this strengthens our faith. And I think that church meeting together, praying for Peter, even though they believed it, even though their heart was telling him this was a dead man, they're still going to pray. And I think that's what faith is. As we say, God, it's impossible for you to do what I want you to do. But I'm going to pray anyway. I'm going to trust you, and I'm going to do something. And that's what James said in chapter 2. He says, the demons believe and tremble. Doesn't do them any good. He says, but if you have faith, it's going to move you. It's going to make you do something. It's going to make you come together and pray. It's going to make you pray for things that in the physical realm are not going to happen. Simon Peter was dead to rights. I mean, Herod had him dead to rights. They were going to stick him up there in front of the people and behead him too, right there on the spot. Boy, that would have really helped the church grow. They'd already gotten James, and now they're going after Simon Peter. But the church says, this is bad. This is looking bad. And so when Rhoda comes in there and says, hey, Peter's standing outside the gate. I love that they said, you're out of your mind. Even though they were in there praying for that very thing. But that's what faith is. That's what faith does. As we say, this is impossible, but I'm going to pray for it anyway. I'm going to give my life to God anyway. Even though it seems like the whole world's telling me that I'm foolish, narrow-minded, bigoted if I believe in God. And it's going to get worse and worse. I mean, this is what they're coming, the left is coming after next, is us. You're just going to start feeling more and more pressure to keep your faith. I think we're seeing a group of people that remind me of this group right here. There's real people living in a real world. And they're up against something that's impossible. But what are they going to do? They're going to pray. They're not going to give up. And that's what faith is. And I hear preachers on TV talking about if you got enough faith, you can make God do some really cool things. But here's what Jesus said. If you got faith of a mustard seed, you can tell that mountain to be thrown into the sea. Now, obviously, that's an illustration. But I've said this before. Having the faith of a mustard seed, it's kind of like you either got it or you don't. Remember the disciples asked Jesus, he said, help us to have more. We want to have more faith. We want to have a stronger faith. But Jesus is saying, look, I just want you to have faith at all. You either believe me or you don't. You either trust me or you don't. So this is what this group was doing. They say, we trust you, we believe you, but we think this may be over your head this time, God. This Herod guy, he's pretty stout. He's pretty tough. There's 16 guards out there, plus he's in prison, plus he's in chains. And God, we don't think you can do this, but we're going to pray anyway. That's what you and I face in our lives. This is too much for you, God. Even you couldn't do this. But I'm going to pray anyway. And I'm going to give you my life anyway. And I'm going to live for you anyway. And look, lo and behold, people get their eyesight back. The lame walk. The dead are restored. Because someone believed. We live in the real world, but we get power from the supernatural world. We live at the intersection of the supernatural and the physical. And God is supernatural. And He can crash into the physical and do stuff. It's just absolutely amazing what He can do. Sparing Simon Peter's life is a great example. So don't give up. Keep praying. Say, God, in my heart, I can't see you doing this. That's what faith is. But I'm gonna trust you anyway. I'm gonna have faith. All right, good lesson for us this morning on faith. All right, let's stand and pray together. Kevin's got a